Hello everyone. A very good morning to those who are joining us from Singapore and Asia, and good afternoon or good evening to all of you joining us from other parts of the world. Thank you for being here with us for today's online event on Soaring with Satellites, presented by SGInnovate and partnered with the High Commission of Canada. My name is Jin from SGInnovate, and as a Singapore government-backed investor, we have been building up and driving deep tech innovations in AI, healthcare, quantum tech, and autonomous technologies across various industries. At SGInnovate, much of our work is to connect Singapore with the global deep tech ecosystem to learn how we can better harness technology for next-generation intelligence and decision-making. Today, we have our panel of experts from Singapore and Canada to talk about the buzz surrounding space technologies and how the COVID-19 pandemic has changed the progressions and applications of such technologies. We encourage you to engage with our speakers during the session by submitting your questions in the Q&A box located on the lower panel of your screen. Without further ado, I would like to invite our moderator for this discussion, Lynette, to start us off. Lynette, please.
Hi, good morning, everyone. It's really good to be doing this panel with our friends from Canada and in Singapore. And I think this is one of the opportunities that COVID has forced us to understand and learn that when the times are hard, the tough will get going. And actually, it would have been at the back of our mind before to do something with Wen and Vincent, and Michelle, who are in Canada. But because now we know we're not going to travel, suddenly we open up a new realm of opportunities to interact and get things done. And I think this is really amazing. And I think it underpins the fundamentals of the human spirit, to survive and to get going and to discover new ways of doing things. I'm very humbled to be in the presence of such intelligent people, but I'm very used to always, not being the smartest person in the room. So that's fine. I'm here to learn, like all of us here. And I'm going to start, by getting them to introduce themselves to all of us so we can know a little bit more. You might want to talk about what's not Googleable, that might make it more interesting. I'm going to start with who appears on my screen first. That would be Wen. Do you want to have a talk about what Kepler does?
Yeah, sure. I can jump right in. So Kepler's mission is really to provide real-time connectivity to everything in space. That's basically our end vision. And that's what we call by bringing internet to space. We're not trying to be like SpaceX to provide internet to the world. We're really trying to connect everything up in deep space. And we're going about doing this by commercializing all the various building blocks that are needed to bring this to bring this technology to the world. So it's it's basically the same kind of business model that SpaceX has, where their main thing is about colonizing Mars.
Sorry.
Yeah. So their main thing is about colonizing Mars, right? They're selling rockets today and building Starlink, right? So the way that we're going about it is like, okay, you know what? People are going to launch satellites, or they're going to go to space and have travel into deep space in the future. But what we want to do is making sure that they all have connectivity and they can do it, connecting to the satellite in real time. And that's basically our end vision.
Cool, wow. And there's a launch coming up, right?
Well, it just happened actually at 9:51:10 just now. So we're waiting for the separation and hopefully first contact in a couple hours time.
Okay, so if you're a multitasker, like we all became so adept with Zoom, there's a link that Wen shared just now. It's about the launch and the Ariane's Space Vega rocket, and it carries Kepler's satellite. So that's happening right now. Talk about, being really connected. And Vincent, you're next on my screen. Tell us about Lux Aerobot.
Yeah, so I everybody, I'm Vincent. So I just want to say thanks for everybody for taking part of the chat. It's nice to see that the space community is just a global thing now. So that's amazing. But yeah, so I'm the CEO at Lux. So what we do at Lux is using IL-2 balloon for Earth observation. So instead, or at least I should say in complementary usage to satellite, using a balloon which fly twice as high as commercial aircraft to take image of the surface of the Earth is an amazing way to get really resolution imagery in a kind of ongoing basis that you can only reach with a geo satellite that is so high that the image you can actually take is pretty bad. So yeah, perhaps I can just add that, what is great with doing ballooning is that, Mars is, as we were just mentioning, at the core of what a lot of other space instruments are all looking to do. That being said, there's also an atmosphere on multiple, planet within our solar system. So using the atmosphere as a way to acquire data is also something that can be leveraged in other planets. But yeah, that's a quick intro.
Wow. It's nice that, as a big boy now, you still get to play with balloons in a very sophisticated way. Keeping the child in all of us alive to discover new heights. I'm going to move to Michelle. How are you, Michelle? Good evening.
Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm the Executive Director of Satellite Canada Innovation Network. That's a mouthful. So we call ourselves SatCan. And we're a nonprofit in Canada, and we support companies that are working in the commercial space world. And we do that with Canadian companies and with international companies that want to come to Canada, and we help Canadian companies go abroad. So the way we do that is we help support the Canadian space ecosystem, and that includes primarily the commercial space world, but it also, like Lux, for example, and Kepler. And we also help support some of the other initiatives that are going on that are really important to keep an ecosystem going. Things like awareness to the general public, and working with other organizations so that we can help young professionals who just graduated to work in space, and lots of other things. So we're an organization that works with lots of organizations that provide these applications.
Wow, excellent. Thank you so much, Michelle. And I'm going to move with Rohit. So Rohit's the guy to pose difficult questions to. Can you tell us a little bit more about Transcelestial?
Thanks, Leonard, for that setup. So hi, everyone. So what Transcelestial is trying to do, we are based in Singapore. And for the last 4 years, what we are trying to do is we are trying to identify and solve the issues with the global internet distribution. You've heard everyone talk about how more than half the world is still unconnected and all of that stuff. But what that really means is that either they don't have any connectivity or they don't have broadband level connectivity, right? So that kind of forms the whole picture. So what we are looking at is the super high bandwidth market. So we are putting together a space constellation which uses our proprietary laser communication tech to effectively replace the undersea cable network in the long run and offer a high bandwidth fiber optic equivalent from space to ground. So that's to kind of get the world connected. And obviously the plans to expand that deep space to Moon, Mars, and beyond.
Oh, great. So you guys all got the cheat sheet right about the questions I was going to ask, in case the audience becomes too shy. But again, feel free to jump in. We want to make this interactive, and I'm sure they've got lots to share from Canada and from Singapore and the latest space tech developments. So feel free to chime in, ask the questions in the Q&A box over there, and I will try to slot it in ASAP. So I'm going to go to the startups here, Rohit and Wen. Tell us about your startup journey, Rohit.
Yeah. So sorry, who's gonna go first?
You can go first. Yeah.
Okay. Sure. Yeah. Right. It's been kind of like an interesting and long-winded one. I think, of course, like the first time things completely change is like when your dreams meet investors, and then everything kind of like becomes different after that. But the startup journey has been quite interesting. I think Singapore is no one. I would say, like, for the longest time, no one thought Singapore to be a place where you could foster space innovation and space startups and tech here. I think barring some issues with like launch and stuff, there's nothing that Singapore can't do. And I think that's what is the long-term idea for what we want to do here. We're building a company where we can possibly scale up to like 700 to even 1,000 satellites in the constellation. And what that means is effectively having an end-to-end supply chain and end-to-end assembly, integration, and testing capabilities, as well as mass manufacturing capabilities of very sophisticated satellite buses etc. going ahead. So that's what it's been kind of since day one, right? To foster that community here. So I started this company along with the co-founder of mine, Dinesh. He's the PhD in the relationship, effectively, and the we started around 4 years ago. And at that point of time, we got some regional as well as global investors to come to Singapore, a lot of them being the first time that they have put money in an Asian company before. And subsequently, we just raised a Series A, which is going to help us kind of expand further. At the core of Transcelestial is basically building the R&D needed to get laser communications to a point where we can not only do that sustainably from intersatellite links, but also ground to satellite, which is the toughest component in doing laser communications, is how do you cross between the subsequent layers of an atmosphere. So that's what the team's been focused on since day one, trying to get that across the ground. So I would say we've built like one of the most advanced teams in laser communications around the world, I would say, in the last 4 years. As an offset of that, in terms of capturing an early market, and as part of the global, solving the global internet challenge, there's 3 things that we had to solve. Number one was, how do you solve for data going across vast continents, which is basically done by undersea cables right now. So more than 99% of the data goes through that. But it's more than $1 billion to establish a single cable. So all new countries and new continents, there's massive difficulties in getting them just access to the big pipe. The second big issue is that when these pipes come up to a major country, it's the job of the telcos and the government to plug that into tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 cities, villages, towns, etc. Right? And often, as we know, telcos are massively lazy, and so it's impossible for them to kind of spend on that infrastructure to get everyone connected, right? And the third biggest issue is last mile connectivity, and especially with 5G coming in, how do you densify connections within the population so that it reaches houses, homes, hospitals, offices, etc. So we've kind of taken that all 3 challenges up. Our first 2 issues, like how do you solve for intercontinental and inter-city, that's going to be handled by the Space Network. But in the last year or so, what we have been doing is using our laser communication to solve the third and the simplest challenge, which is last mile. We've made small devices which effectively are going on cell towers and rooftops and stuff in all around Southeast Asia right now, effectively accelerating 5G adoption by almost 6 months to a year earlier than what was predicted, right? So that's us solving immediate issues while the company is continuing to build towards space. We'll do our first launches within a year's time, year and a half's time. And at that point of time, we'll be able to demonstrate connecting very long distance city connections over massive bandwidth. I'm just going to leave you guys with like our starting speeds that we are looking at is around 100 gigabits per second uplink and downlink. So these are symmetric speeds. And by the second or the third iteration, we are looking at around 1 to 5 terabits per second downlink and uplink speeds. So these are speeds which are capable of powering entire cities.
So we'll check back with you in 12 months time, you know, for the launch.
Yeah.
I think the whole Singapore will be so excited about it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, and coming to someone who's having a launch now, Wen, you know, tell us about the startup journey. How has it been for you?
Sure, but before that, Rohit, we need to talk. we need to fly your stuff for you too. Let's chat.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's chat.
So we started the company back in 2015, so it's about 5+ years ago.
About same as Rohit.
Rohit's 4, so we're a bit older. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, who's counting, right? So we raised 2 rounds of finance, and a seed round, a Series A round. The company is almost at around close to 70 full-time employees these days. We've launched 2 satellites to orbit, both in 2018, and just like what Lynette was saying just now, our 3rd satellite literally just took off, about 20 minutes ago on a Vega rocket, and more satellites will be launched by end of this year. As I was mentioning just now, we are basically commercializing the different technologies that we have, built so far, and we have 2 products that we're bringing to the market. The first one is what we call Global Data Service. You can think of it as like an on-orbit Dropbox, if you will. We'll basically give you a full end-to-end terminal You can be literally anywhere in the globe, and we will move gigabytes to terabytes of data for you with our own satellite. And it's all basically, our own proprietary network that is fully vertically integrated. The most famous mission that our claim to fame is a icebreaker that is called the Polar Stern research vessel. It's actually an icebreaker that is parked at the Arctic ice circle for a year to study polar ice cap drift. So Kepler is their main communications backbone to get all the research data back home. And it's just such a profound thing to be able to say that we're a small company in Canada that is providing a communication service is such a big mission that is hundreds of millions of dollars that actually has huge impact to the world. And the second product that we're bringing to the market is our IoT product. So you can just think of it as I'm sure you guys are familiar with the Internet of Things network, where it's low power, low data rate, super cheap. You can deploy all these sensors anywhere and everywhere around the globe. And what we're trying to do is basically repurposing our software-defined radio on orbit to pick up all these small data all across the globe, and then basically connect the data back home. And that's basically our second product that we're trying to demonstrate with the third satellite that we literally just launched just now. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Yeah. So I'm going to move to Michelle. Michelle has an interesting job. She looks after everyone.
Well, I try. They call me the mother hen.
Tell us about, some things about what you do, and maybe something like Singapore can learn, or startups in Canada and Singapore can work together, with your support along those lines. Thanks, Michelle.
Yeah, so so first of all, I'm always amazed by how international this sector is, and it really brings me a lot of joy, because there's so much isolationism going on out there that it's so nice to see that working together really does make the technology and the opportunities better. So that's why I was so delighted to participate with this with Singapore. A lot of governments are really interested in working together to find complementary programs that are going to help companies like this leverage the seed funds or the smaller amounts of money that they can get from angels or from other government programs. So SatCan works primarily with executing programs. We do things that help research and development. So for example, Satellite Canada Innovation Network is the secretariat for something called the Optical Satcom Consortium. So Rohit, we need to have a chat. And that is helping to develop the next generation of laser communications. And so we work with other international consortia as well. And we also do things to help Canadian companies to demonstrate their capabilities on the world stage. So we do things like lead missions, and we help to bring missions to Canada. So in doing that, we can act on behalf of Canadian business to try and increase their opportunities, not just with their with the Canadian government, but with governments like Singapore. We've been working with the UK and Scottish governments as well, where of course, I know we'll get into this later, but COVID has delayed some other things that we had planned for this year. But it's really about that, providing opportunities for all these other panelists as much as we can. So it's interesting because we have worked with Kepler and with Lux, and we hope that we've brought some value to their startup journey. One of the things that we do try to do with something we call the SatCan Space Support Program is we try to provide services to these companies that otherwise they wouldn't be able to afford. So by leveraging some money that we get from the government, we're able to provide consulting services to help them develop things like their technology roadmap, help them to figure out where their market is, help them to figure out what a reasonable business plan would be, you know, and sometimes these things aren't as apparent to them as other people who have been in the business for a long time. I am not that expert, but we hire experts to help these companies. So that's what we've been doing. And of course, we're always trying to listen out to for other small and medium-sized enterprises and startups to see what else we can do for them. And then we do things like we take that to government and we say, this is what the industry is saying. Or we go to other larger institutions and we say, this is what they'd like to see from you, giant multinational that shall remain nameless. So we do try to do that. And working with international organizations like yours helps us to see how you're doing things as well.
I see. So what do you think would be some relevant focus areas for our audience here today? You know, you mentioned the Optical Satcom Consortium. What are other specific technology areas or value chain, you know, parts of the value chain that StatCan is very active in or has identified that as a priority?
That's a really good question. It's communications is very big in Canada because of how big Canada is. And how spread out we are. And one of the others is Earth observation. There are a number of companies that are really interested in how to track things like wildfires and natural disasters and tracking climate change. These are really important things, Earth observation. Another one is the robotics, particularly because of its migration into other sectors like medical, like manufacturing, and I'd say the other top would be, and it just fell out of my mind. Of course, so yeah, communications, EO, robotics, and the integration of other sectors is what I was going to say. Is things like AI, things like blockchain, and merging those into the applications for space. So I find that a lot of our job is and I try to keep this out of the job of the startups who are trying to focus on their own business, is our job is to try and convert the other non-space people to see that their technology is enhanced by ours and vice versa. So data and analytics, their end products are going to be better by cooperating with the space sector. You know, Skywatch in Canada is a really good example of that. So so there's a lot of ways that a lot of these priorities for Canada are international. Canada does tend to be very active in space medicine. And that, of course, goes into deep space exploration. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, I think it's really good because we would all know space is very vast, very expensive, and it's also terrestrial in a way. You know, how we use GNSS, how we use play Pokemon Go, and then you go into space exploration, you know, to Jupiter and Saturn. So it's very wide ranging, and it's really good when we want to look for business opportunities or partnership opportunities to know which are some of the focus areas that, you know, a particular country or association or organization is looking at. So that was really useful, Michelle. Thank you so much. Now, how about you, Vincent? I know it's probably pronounced in a very sexy way, but so pardon me, I'm just going to do it a Singaporean way, Vincent. How is your product used and in which industries? Would you have any use cases for that?
Yeah, so I think, as Michelle was saying, like one of the key challenge of, you know, a lot of space companies is that you can impact multiple industries. And, you know, as it was previously mentioned, you know, a lot of startups are looking to impact stuff like, you know, deep space, but the reality being is that there's no customer willing to pay you any bucks for it right now. So I think we need to like put that into the fancy vision kind of thing and focus on, you know, the short term kind of, you know, who is willing to pay you money. And, you know, we're fortunate that our first paying customer is the Australian Defence Force. And the aim or how we're using our technology is by being able to provide persistent remote sensing for bushfire. So as some of you may remember, prior to COVID, everybody were talking about, Australia because they were burning basically. And then what was happening is that, when you were looking at the satellite in space, trying to map out and then predict how a fire was behaving, basically it was not possible to do so for various reasons. But in a nutshell, the image was not precise enough, or the revisit rate, so what was the time between each image being taken was so long that it was not helpful, and basically everything was burning. So all this to say is, from a Lux perspective, we really have, two big customer categories. So one being, urban or government type customer, and the other one being more, kind of remote type areas. So, mining, agriculture, and stuff like that. But all this to say, we can, Earth observation by nature is taking image of the surface of the Earth. So you can basically help anything that, fit within that definition. That being said, and I like what Michelle was saying in terms of data analytics, one of the big problem with, in my opinion, at least for space companies, is that it's not only about being able as Lux providing image of the surface of the Earth, but like for bushfire, for example, how are you able to use this high resolution infrared imagery to better predict how a fire is behaving? And the problem is, it's a data problem or data index problem, which needs the right data set to be able to, basically make it better compared to what it was like 20 years ago. So, in Earth, like, we can basically help any industry, but then the problem is, like, do you have the right analytics to support that new data set? So all this to say, I think like one of the main challenge right now in space is how do you help create that, stronger, larger, better community, so that it's not about, each company doing the full feed, like the full loop, but like working in collaboration with other startup or larger company, so that you may end up doing something that was not possible in the past. But yeah, so I did answer your question, and I mean, basically to answer it more precisely, we can do anything, but the problem is, like, as a single company, and to some degree, I think like Planet Lab is a good example of what is not possible to do. Like, it's impossible to do like 20 industry in a single company. You just don't have enough software engineer to do so. So it's more about, leveraging Canada, Singapore, and whoever country is willing to join the dance. But yeah, Lux is definitely willing to be part of that dance.
Yeah, and I think Michelle has this comment, right? One of the best things a space startup can do is to find terrestrial applications. So you can actually, monetize your ideas and the innovation. That's, I tend to share this quite often when I'm, giving talks. Space is always very romantic. It's very exciting. It's very, it's about the unknown, right? You talk about Star Trek, Star Wars. But ultimately, I like to tell that we haven't really discovered aliens nor alien bank accounts, and all bank accounts are still on planet Earth, and we deal with humans. So if you want to have, there's a very pragmatic side of the space business. And actually, space, I've met so many space engineers, space enthusiasts, startups, big companies. They're very, very pragmatic. They're one of the most grounded people I've ever met. And it's amazing because you need that groundedness to make sure your ideas and concepts have a good foundation, so that, ironically and interestingly, your dreams can take off. And I think that's something, I think I'm hearing from our panelists, that we all know we have to have good business case, good business proposition, so that our dreams can take off. How about you, Wen? Do you have anything to add on from what you mentioned earlier about use cases of your product? And
No, I mean, that captured it really well. I mean, again, just like, like I was mentioning just now, right, in that you do, like, one of the key difficulties with space companies that have giant ambitions are it takes a lot of money to get there, and a lot of very difficult technologies, and as I'm sure Rohit can attest to. And when Rohit mentioned that, like, he's starting by using the same technology that eventually will make it to space, but we're going after some terrestrial application, that's music to my ears, because you know what, that's basically what we're doing. I mean, the difference is we're launching satellites to carry out to provide the service that we're providing to the world today. But the idea or the concept behind it is the same, right? In that you don't carry the old space mentality where you build it and hope that it will come. You really have to use new technology and iterate towards your end vision, and you do it in a very sustainable manner that you generate revenue by solving real world problem with your technology, and you iterate and build towards your end goal.
Yeah, cool. Thank you, Win. So, yeah, I think people took it very seriously when I said you can ask Rohit difficult questions. So there's a whole string of questions for you. I'm going to pick out one that's relevant to the use cases. You know, are you looking at integrating QKD in the future? Can you comment on the differences between your current tech and QKD, which I think is quite different? But you should answer that.
Correct.
You can see the question right here.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me? Okay. Yeah, so I mean, very interesting tech, and obviously I think Singapore's lab for CQD at NUS is one of the top 3 in the world effectively working on this. One being, I think, the Chinese Academy of Sciences, and I think the second one is one of the labs in Bristol, if I'm not wrong. So, I mean, they have a company called Spectral, and we know those guys really well. Obviously, QKD is super interesting. We all really love the tech and stuff, but I think what people forget is, I think it's partially to do with like how QKD is portrayed in media, is to understand that like QKD does not mean quantum communications, right? Like there's no such thing as quantum communications. You can't do comms over entangled photons, right? So that's one of the big things. But what QKD basically brings is basically security, right? Like, so it allows you to have like a keyless exchange mechanism for you to do security between your packets end to end. Now, do we want to integrate it? Absolutely. In the first few iterations of the satellite, no. The reason is because I think QKD is still, there is, for those who are familiar with the TRL cycle, QKD is still a little bit early on the TRL cycle. And our conversations with Spectral is basically, they are kind of doing the same thing as I think everyone has articulated on this channel, is like, they're testing it in space, but they're commercializing on the ground. So they are now talking to folks like the data center guys and stuff. There's so many applications for QKD in terrestrial communications and stuff, where it can very robustly and fully mature before it can be taken to satellite. When you talk about encryption, we still haven't reached a point where some of our stronger encryption mechanisms can be broken, right? So if you talk about high-speed data and stuff, the existing AES 254 or 256 and other kind of encryption mechanisms are still quite strong and stuff. So QKD is probably not relevant immediately, but I would say between now and 10 years time, 100%. That's what we want to do. And I guess CQT guys are planning a mission to demonstrate that very soon as well, which is great.
Great, thanks, Rohit. Yeah, I'm going to jump back to Michelle on the next questions. You know, how do you feel that the Canadian local scene contributed to the development and commercialization of space technologies? And I think you could be very specific and precise in that, so we could learn.
Sure. So a long time ago, Canada really had no space strategy. We didn't have a framework. We didn't have a plan. Back in 2016, a Space Advisory Board was formed. I was invited to join that, and the government was very interested in trying to figure out what Canada needed to do to stay in the space race, to be in the space game. And so after a lot of consultation and a lot of hard work that, you know, between the public and other stakeholders and the government, a space strategy was born. And so out of that space strategy, there were a number of recommendations, and you can find that on the web. I'll post it right after I'm finished speaking here. That space strategy tried to provide a holistic answer for what Canada should do to pursue space, to better our economy, to better our citizens, to better the world. So that space strategy was issued in February 2018, and then about a week later, the government came out with a $2 billion promise of money over the next 24 years to support Lunar Gateway primarily, and to support a Canadian space economy. So the Lunar Gateway, of course, was in cooperation with NASA. So, you know, Canada has a very strong history in robotics. So since then, Canada has been chosen to complete the Canadarm3. And meanwhile, about $150 million over 5 years has been spent, is being spent on something called the Lunar Exploration Accelerator Program. So when we did the consultations as the Space Advisory Board, there were a lot of people saying, you know, I've got this great technology. So for example, and I'm not saying that Kepler said this, but I'm saying, you know, companies like Kepler said, we've got this great technology, but before we can, you know, get our license, or before we can, you know, monetize it, commercialize it, we need to make it space ready. But there was no mechanism to fund that launch. There was no way for them to develop that technology without any investment, because an investor, really, commercial investment is not normally going to put in, you know, the Elon Musk money that's needed to develop the technology and put it into space. So that's why the LEAP, it's called the LEAP program, the Lunar Exploration Accelerator Program. It was developed so that these moonshots could be taken, so that Canada could, you know, try and space test some of these technologies so that they could actually build something out of them. So, so that Lunar Exploration Accelerator Program does a whole host of things that, you know, Canada has one of the best R&D funding programs in the world. But there were these niches that there were just barriers. We aren't allowed to fund that. And so the LEAP covered those gaps in as much as they could. So, so that's been very, very helpful to try and cover the gaps of the technology development and the space testing that was required. So one of the other things that was interesting was that Canada is divided up into a whole bunch of provinces and a whole bunch of different ministries. So what happens is space is sitting at a very, so let's just say that space is not at the cabinet table, really. You know, the industry minister is. And so when the prime minister, you know, when they talk about budget from Treasury, they say, okay, we have this much money to spend this year. And so the industry minister has to divide that between all of his other agencies and departments. And space is only one of 50 of those. So it's very difficult to have that voice at the table. And one of the things that the Space Advisory Board did was we tried to talk about frequently with the government and with stakeholders a whole of government approach. This was, let's talk to the Ministry of Environment to tell them this is why space is good for you and how it's going to meet your mandate. And we did that all across the board. So in doing that, all the cabinet ministers were singing the same song saying, hey, we need investment in space because we need to figure out how to monitor bushfires. Hey, we need investment in space because we need to figure out how to improve communications in the north. Or we need, you know, and the health minister was saying, we need space because we need to be able to figure out how to deliver health in the north. So in doing that, a whole of government approach was born, and that has translated into an enormous amount of money that space itself could never get, but it's been spread out across. It's been spread out across the board. So it may not say space on it, but it's impacted. But it's impacted space technology development, which is the Optical Satcom Consortium is an excellent example of that, because, you know, the government dropped $10 million, and I know that's Canadian dollars, but that's a lot of money for us. Sorry, it was $100 million, not 10. It was $100 million into that consortium under the High Throughput Secure Network program. And so because of that, they were able to do more research and development. Now, it doesn't say space on it, but there is a component of that space. And so we were able to derive some of that money for R&D that we never would have had. So that has been an enormous help. And, you know, the current government has been very, very open to really trying to deliver space economy development, and in being a huge proponent of the education of, you know, not just, you know, the age of my co-panelists, and I really have to commend you on how, you know, and I don't know how old you all are, but I get so excited when I see young people doing all the ambitious things that you're doing. It makes me so happy. And, you know, and the thing is that they're also doing this now at the age of the little ones, you know, the little ones that really want to be, you know, they don't want to just be astronauts. They understand that, oh, I don't have to be an engineer or a scientist to work in space. I can be a space lawyer. And, or, you know, because there are jobs to do this, right? And this is the exciting part, is that you don't just have to do the sciencey bit, which I'm totally in favor of. Yay, science people. I love STEM and I totally support it. But it's also exciting to see the non-STEM kids get excited about that. So sorry, that was my little STEM talk, but so I get really excited about that. So those are the things that's happened in the Canadian world.
That's right. But Michelle, you're right. It is a whole ecosystem. You know, somebody needs to do the regulatory part, somebody needs to do the law part, somebody needs to go to the UN, you know, to get space in space. So it is a full ecosystem development. Yeah. And
yeah, it's true.
Yeah. And because Rohit's the only other, and I are the only other Singaporean on this panel, you know, I thought the way Singapore helped contribute to the development is in the private sector part of it. Because Singapore traditionally, we're not a big country like Canada. So I love how we're talking about, you know, two different spectrum. We've always been an open economy. We've always been, you know, open to investments. We're a very strong finance hub. And I think that, you know, ability for investors to feel that the money is safe in Singapore is a good thing, and then deploying that into space technology and development. I think the private sector in Singapore has a very important role. You know, of course, you know, traditionally and even today, the government plays a very important role. But I think, you know, like organizations like SGInnovate, you know, bring the VCs together, working with entrepreneur first, getting the private money, the investors and the startups coming together has really helped, you know, us in the development of our space technologies. What do you think, Rohit, you know, from your view as someone doing it?
Yeah, so let me just add something quickly here. So I think one of the things that is really similar between Singapore and Canada is, you know, there's a risk of getting to the fallacy that, you know, way too much Canadian company has went into, which is, you know, doing R&D is one thing, and then commercialization is another thing. And a lot of Canadian companies over the past decade have sold, you know, their asset to, let's say, a US-based company. And I think Singapore, to some degree, being, you know, close to, you know, India and China, definitely has, you know, some market that has some appetite for technology. But, you know, if Singapore is not able to commercialize, you know, their R&D, then a similar pattern may emerge. So I think like that's just a really, you know, simple comparison that is, you know, of interest, because at the end of the day, if you want to build a sustainable space economy and ecosystem, it's about, you know, having companies that are here for like decades, not basically, you know, supported by government, but then being sold to foreign countries, and then it's kind of over.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, absolutely. If I could just, sorry, and I really want to highlight something that, you know, Vincent, you're absolutely correct. I think that what Canada has really tried to do over the last 5 years has really tried to make it more accommodating for companies to stay here, because you're absolutely right. It was get started in Canada and then they're out. You know, I mean, many companies in Canada have to have an offshore base, and whether that is, and when I say offshore, I don't mean that as a bad word. I mean that as to get access to capital, they had to go to Singapore, they had to go to the UK, and they had to have a presence elsewhere, because it wasn't, the climate in Canada was not amenable. You know, when you're paying as much as you're paying for employees in Canada, And I'm not dissing Canada on this. There are certain tax breaks if you're big enough, and if. And Canada, I think, has some work to do on that. But with certain partnerships, I think with centers like Singapore, I think Canada can do some offshoring of their development while keeping some of that economy in Canada. That it's very difficult to grow a very large business in Canada. It's better now, but it's still very difficult. So and again, this is what SATCAN does: is we go back to the CSA and ISED, or Industry Canada, and Treasury and all these others to say, you know what, you make it a tax break, a one-to-one, a dollar-for-dollar tax break for people to invest in, for example, resources with flow-through shares. Why can you not do that with space investments? Something that is going to bring Canada legacy for the rest of its life, right? So when you see that kind of tax break going to resource and technology that is not space technology, it's very frustrating because, and I get it, resource has applications everywhere, and it's getting greener and all the rest of it. But this is something that Canada needs to invest in now. So very good point, Vincent. I think that this is a really critical issue for Canada, and partnerships with places like Singapore are really going to be critical in the next 5 to 7 years.
Oh, great, Michelle. Do you have anything to add, Rohit? You can dispute what I said. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's hundreds of ways to look at this, like what Singapore, what role does it play now versus later. I'd probably touch on one or two things which have not been touched by all of you guys. And so number one, I would say, is that in the world, as we are seeing the world devolve into basically become increasingly nationalistic, and we're seeing a lot of the geopolitical tensions and stuff. Space is one of those areas, obviously, which is at the top in the minds of everyone when it comes to that, right? And we are seeing, for example, recently one of the laser comms guys, Mineric, they got their licenses from China revoked and stuff because the German authorities pulled their license to sell outside Germany, right? Because laser comms is very strategic. Space has always been very strategic, and I think one of the things places like Canada and Singapore can offer is effectively friendships with countries which wouldn't necessarily work together. And of course, I'm hinting at US and China, but the idea is we're being here, you can be geopolitically neutral, effectively. Manufacturing here, you can assure the quality and integration of the tech, effectively, that's going out. That's quite relevant, especially being in the space industry. The second thing, which is not yet probably public news and might come out soon, is that Singapore actually spends around $500 million to $1 billion in space, but it is so fragmented across defense and academia and other kinds of things, right? What's happening is there's a massive consolidation effort going behind the scenes to kind of bring that together. And there's research innovation budgets, and then there is other industry budgets which are being prepared effectively to kind of bring this push into the market. And if you are in a very if you are for all those who are on the call and attendees who want to start their own companies, right, in space, think about this. If you are in Silicon Valley or the LA area trying to start a company, you're fighting for the same space dollars, either from NASA or from the VCs, and you're trying to compete from the same aerospace talent. If you are in Singapore or let's say Canada, for example, in Singapore, you're pretty much acting as a sieve to get talent from China, India, and all the Southeast Asian countries, from Japan, from Australia, right? So you pick, taxes are low, lifestyle is one of the best in the world, and you can build your team away from all the distractions with access to some of the best funding where you don't have to fight for that. So it's also about what kind of a distractions you get away from to build that service. So everything else, I think you guys have covered quite well, but I thought this was two interesting things that people who are trying to start a new company should think about what they want to
I
do.
also just want to point out that the weather in Singapore is so much better than it is here in Canada. Sorry.
Thank you.
For about 8 months of the year, 100%.
Yeah, no, but that's true. Yeah, so that's what I would like to add.
Great. Hey, Rohit, while I have you, you know, like during this COVID situation, I think the Singapore government also provided certain support. You were featured on the local news. You know, how has the support been useful? I mean, you don't have to comment on that, but also, how has this COVID situation impacted Trans-Celestial?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think it's the same. I think Ven was talking about it as well, right? Like, plans have gotten delayed unknowingly, and you have nervous investors looking over their shoulder, asking you what the hell is going on, right? Kind of stuff. So I think that's the situation pretty much for every company on the planet, even if your industry is doing really well. It's just a period of massive uncertainty. I think Singapore has always, and I think it came out, the Prime Minister gave a really good speech yesterday, but I think one thing that we can do as a city state is effectively fail faster, right? So it's effectively you take a decision and you see how well that decision was and you course correct, right? And I think that's what Singapore has done. Like in the very beginning, the uncertainty of how we resolve this biologically was there, but financially we knew it's going to impact everyone else. So Singapore rolled out, like our investors, Enterprise Singapore, EDB, etc., got like around, I think, 300 million plus in terms of funds for just funding early stage deep tech. So literally these were like, hey, can you introduce us to companies who really want deep tech funding and stuff? And I think there was like kind of a mini boom of funding in the last couple of months. So if you look, I think the Ken and Tech in Asia and some of these guys have mentioned how while every other region was kind of struggling, Southeast Asia saw some of the record-breaking fundraising numbers effectively. And again, a lot of it was deep tech and stuff. So for Trans-Celestial, I mean, of course, like the more you hire locals and stuff, government supports, like we got 70-80% money back for all the local employees we have hired, tons of like tax benefits, rental benefits, etc. And that's across the board, not just us, right? And there are massive low interest loans as well that have been moved out. We haven't taken any yet, but there's tons of companies I know. There's loans at 2-3%, etc., which are guaranteed 90% by the government, right? So again, these kind of debt financing and alternative financing ventures can massively help. And then again, of course, Singapore being small, companies which died out contributed back a lot to the pool of available candidates. So it's just very easy and very quick to hire back very high quality people, etc. from here. So I'm not sure. I'm guessing like Canada also went through something similar as well.
Great. So it's a Teacher's Day today. So the teachers are taking a break and then the kids are dumped at home with the mother. So they just came back home. But there's a very interesting story. So my son's name is Everett. And that was where Stargate Universe was filmed in Canada. And we were watching that when I was pregnant. And the leading guy of the show was Everett Young. And that's why my son is named Everett. So when you were talking about the lunar exploration, Michelle, and you know how from long ago and Canada's development in space, I wanted to tell you back 10 over years ago, I was watching Stargate Universe, which was filmed in Canada. And it's very much a part of my life every day.
Well, and it's funny because I used to live in Vancouver so I know.
Big fan of Stargate franchise. Massive fans here.
Yeah.
So you're gonna hear the result of that naming, but okay.
It's okay.
Yeah, you know, we're at 10:45 and I'm supposed to open up to more Q&A, which we have so many questions here. I really want to take this one, and of course, if you guys want to share, just you know, let me know. This one, in Africa, we can only afford nano satellites for now. Is there any area our region can be part of collaborations, given our system size limitation? Does any one of you want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can just add quickly that I kind of disagree with how the question was asked in a way that, you know, it's untrue that any region of the world doesn't is not about for any type of space asset or whatever asset we're talking about that's kind of space like. I think the challenge is really more in the business model, and at the end of the day, one of the trend that we're seeing more and more is that the data that you acquired and how you can use that data to do something else is way more important than anything else. So I will strongly suggest that it's not about figuring out how one country can afford anything, but how can you create a win-win in which you can create a long-lasting value by generating data which is valuable for other places and also multiple countries, and then having one country that helps you then get more involved in the same process. So for example, I know that in Central Africa, there is a bunch of, insect kind of eating crops. If you can better map them, like there's not only one country that is interested in that. And, using data from one country to map out how, those insects are, moving forward can definitely help more than one country. So I think that this is just a simple example of, this is I guess an answer, but more than happy to hear anything else.
So anyone else? I think even actually the attendees could answer. Actually, I think Africa is collaborating very closely with many of the international organizations, including ESAR and Europe, in developing satellite programs. I think Nigeria has already launched 2 satellite programs in collaboration with the other SSTL, Surrey in UK. Ghana has recently, gotten the space budget to develop programs. And I have friends, from South Africa as well, and they are very involved in a lot of the satellite programs and mission, including Rwanda, which is a really progressive nation, over in South Africa. So I found that they are already fairly plugged in, if not very plugged into the international satellite landscape, and already finding good partners for that kind of collaboration. But of course, I think we want to see more between Canada and South Africa and Singapore.
Yeah, maybe what I can add is I think it's when people say Africa, it's like a giant landmass in their mind, but it is so different from country to country. And if you're looking at places like South Africa, Egypt, and the middle of the Congo and stuff, these are massively booming economies, which from our perspective, we're already starting to work with South Africa and some of the telcos and stuff there. And there's such a massive demand for connectivity there. That it's just impossible for her to keep up pace with that, and there's absolutely no shortage of money, whether it's from the industrial money as well as if you talk about money that comes from UNDP or IFC or similar kind of programs and stuff for development there, right? And of course, going into some of what I think Wen mentioned, using satellites to basically track massive amounts of agricultural lands as well as resource tracking and stuff is huge there actually if you can go. So yeah, for a lot of those use cases you don't need super high bandwidth use cases like laser comms and stuff. So you could do with L-band, K-band and similar kind of technologies, right? Which is very easy to do on small sats, 3 to 6 EU kind of satellites, and the prices for those are just going down every day, right? I don't know, maybe Wen can comment a bit on that.
Yeah. Well, we're going to be a bit short of time. I do want to take one or two more questions. I think there's one from Hussein who asked when, and I'm going to ask that to Vincent as well. What are your plans for next year? And what's going to be the evolution of your project like? Maybe Vincent, go ahead, Vincent.
Yeah. I may just say that, I think with COVID, everybody is just, I think any future plan as of right now is just we don't know. But I'm more than happy to pass that to any other. But I think the key outcome of COVID-19 is really that planning to some degree is a useless function when you don't know when you are able to do in 6 months from now. So I think R&D and trying to make your product as good as possible for one market is really to kind of capture it. This kind of the best thing that you can try to do.
And what are you guys up to for next year? How many more satellites are you going to launch? What exciting plans do you have?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, barring no more crazy launch delays like what happened with TARS, but Voice Reach out with their satellite. I mean, I can tell you that we are planning to launch more than 10, but less than 100 satellites. And we have a fully functioning satellite manufacturing facility in downtown Toronto. So, if you guys are ever in Toronto, accept this as an open invitation. You're free to come by and we'll show you around of like what kind of like facility that we've put together to really print satellite. That's kind of what we're doing next. We're taking our proven technologies to just basically then commercialize it and launch as many as needed, basically based on demand. Like we're really trying to flip the build it and then they will come kind of mentality into see demand and then build it and launch it, put it to orbit very, very quickly. And that's the kind of like model that we're going after for the next little bit. And to make it more interesting so that it lines up with what Rohit is saying, one of the newer technologies that we're going to put on is going to be inter-satellite link. Now we have not settled on if it's going to be RF or laser, but if Rohit has a terabits per second link, I will love to fly that on our satellite. So let's talk after.
Great.
Yeah, so there you go. Seems like in the immediate future, we will be closing some business with Kepler, which is great. Now, I think in the long term, so that most of our focus in the next 12 months, I would say like around close to 60%, is going to be on establishing a ground business. So what Transcelestial is at this point of time is a massive ground business with space as the upside. So we are working and expanding from Southeast Asia now pretty much globally. So we're already in places like Australia, New Zealand, EMEA, and we are having conversations with Canada, obviously US, LATAM, and some of these markets. The aim is how can we transition big clusters from 3G to 4G and then help all the telcos who are in 5G right now to get faster test beds and deployments. So that's going to be the aim for the next 12 months. We are starting to produce hundreds of these small devices for last mile connectivity now with our manufacturers and stuff in Singapore. And so that's the big business that we are kind of building. The remaining 40% for us is to basically complete the R&D and test. And as we test, we'll show to the world as well. Obviously, we'll keep announcing. But to finish the test and R&D for our space network, and to be a little bit more precise on that, primarily focused around doing initial PDR and as well as launch for our first 3 test satellites, as well as manufacturing massively scalable optical ground station network, right? And again, I want to be very, very focused on manufacturing because often we talk about space industry and like, oh, this defense contractor here has this capability and this one here has done it once. What's needed to drive adoption on large scale is manufacturing, and this is massively underrated. Manufacturing is the only way to get like prices down on large scales. Anything can be done once, but to do it repeatedly, thousands of times every day on a large scale is what gets technology in the hands of people, and that's what we have been focused on from day one. Optical comms for the longest time has remained in the domain of defense and very niche space industries. What we aim to do is basically make technologies on ground station and space terminals, which can scale massively and rapidly over the next couple of years. And we are talking about tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of these devices.
Sorry, there was a little wall behind me. Great, thanks, Rohit. You know, is that when you do the shameless plug for Jonathan's flex? But I'm just kidding.
Yeah, all right. Oh, yeah, and Project Cyclotron, go for it. And
Yeah, great. So I think one of the things SSTL works closely with Rohit. Actually, Rohit was very close with Flex, which is a manufacturing base in Singapore. And I think, that introduction through Jonathan between Rohit's Transcelestial and Flex, which is a $22 billion, manufacturing company based in Singapore, really helped to provide a lot of support. And I think that goes back to Michelle's point where it's not just about the space vertical, but it's also the lawyers, the regulators, the manufacturing, the supply chain, the procurement. It's quite a whole ecosystem to get the business going in a viable, sustainable, profitable manner. I'm going to hand the mic back to Jin. Jin, it's been such a wonderful session. And, we still have questions outstanding, but I know you're concerned about time.
Yeah.
Over to you, Jin. Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, time flies when we're all having a lot of fun. So thank you once again to Lynette, to all our panel speakers, and for the great sharing, and thank you to all our attendees for your ongoing questions. It's always very heartening to see how much enthusiasm we have at our online sessions. But real conversations often happen after, like hopefully Wen and Rohit can get something going on after this. And we do hope all of you can keep connected. So the recording of this session will also be uploaded on SGInnovate's YouTube channel roughly in about a week's time. So do head on there for a review of today's event. And everyone, till our next online event. So thank you so much and bye everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.